All right, good morning, Doug. Things are happening so fast in the world, it's hard to even address everything at one point. It's like what there's a second and third assassination attempts apparently on Trump that have happened.
A third?
There's
Wait a minute. Oh, I didn't even know that.
that it was this morning. Apparently, they found an explosive device on Trump's parade route today.
Wow. Well, I'm of the opinion that they're going to keep trying to assassinate him because these people really don't want him installed. So it's,
Why? Why though? Why is it so bad, do you think? Why is it so important that he not be installed?
yeah, it seems that all the remaining forces, I mean, look, Trump is no prize. His economics are way off. He does have a streak of authoritarianism. All this is true, but he's basically a cultural conservative. He'd like to maintain what are generally perceived of as basic American values. Okay. And that's a good thing. But these people that control the Democratic Party and many institutions, like all the universities and frankly, the whole educational system, and a great deal of Hollywood and many corporations at this point, uh, I don't know what's going on in their minds, but they really hate the idea of America and they're trying to overthrow it. That's the way I see it. Anyway, and it's very disturbing. This has been building up for years. And of course, we've talked about this for years. And you could see this developing for years at an accelerating pace. But just now, with what's going on at this moment, it seems like it's reaching a crescendo, a crisis, and it actually is scary. I mean, in the past, I've always been concerned and worried about, and could make black humor jokes, gallows humor, which is something I enjoy. It's a little bit of a personal specialty about these things happening. But actually, uh, the rubber's starting to meet the road. It's actually happening.
Yeah, I wonder what I still can't. I mean, it's not like Trump was as president. It's not he's been there before. It's not like he really beat back the deep state in any big way or
Oh,
really got in the way of anything major that was happening. So why is it so unacceptable? Unacceptable to the point where they're willing to destroy the world. It's not, I mean, assassinating Trump is one thing, but it seems like they're willing to blow everything up. You see the acceleration of stuff, and we'll talk about this. And with Russia, you see this, what happened in Lebanon yesterday and today, continuing with these explosion of these devices. You see the ramping up of censorship, and not just in the U.S., but around the world. And it's crazy. I mean, there's some motivation that I can't quite grasp.
yeah, Trump is no prize, but at this late date, uh, to them, he's the one figure that people can kind of gather around uh, to fight them. So if they took out Trump, is there any Republican, J.D. Vance, that the same people would vote for? I don't know.
I think out of principle they would, the Trump supporters, I think it would be the last protest probably to do that. But I mean, the whole other thing is after there's this election isn't even going to be like, let's say the election occurs. I don't think everyone's like kind of looking at that deadline, but we have an example from not that long ago where the election was adjudicated for far long after the election. I mean, the Al Gore, the Bush Jr. election, I don't think that was decided until January, and it came down to one county. Like could be 50 counties done the same
Yes,
way.
the hanging Chad scandal. And it used to be that the election would be decided on the night of the election almost, or the next day or so. That was it. And they'd announce it on TV and it was accepted. It was no problem. But now it goes on for weeks. And I was thinking about what is likely to happen in the remaining weeks before the election. And I would be willing to take a bet that Biden, who's really just a vegetable right now, he's not even the president really, that he will resign so that Kamala will actually be the president. And that would tilt the odds further in her favor, I think, especially if there was some type of an event, a real crisis, a national emergency. Uh, you don't want to change horses in the middle of the stream or an early stage war, and the Jacobins would then be cemented into power. So I'll make a bet that that the vegetable resigns and Kamala, excuse me, I keep getting the pronunciation of her name wrong, uh, is appointed, becomes president. I think that's reasonable. And to create and to sow discord and fear among the enemy, the Republicans and conservatives, and uh, I think they'll continue trying to take Trump out, and that could be part of the chaos that they want to sow, so that they can pass new laws to keep the country together. So
Yeah.
let's see if that happens.
Is it
I'll go on record with that as being a possibility. Just
is it
think,
enough? Is it enough to just to have? I mean, my response to the second assassination attempt when I saw it was just like not surprised. It's like, well, yeah, it happens. And then another one this morning. Well, at least with they found some explosives allegedly. And again, it's just like, well, what do you expect? Like, it doesn't even. I'm desensitized to it personally, and I'm sure a lot of people are. I don't know if you can create that, whole of government crisis with something like that alone. It seems like something else must happen.
I think you're right. Something that's much bigger, actually. And the second assassination attempt, I presume that that's the case. I mean, all we really know is reporting in that, but apparently this person was sequestered among the bushes for 12 hours before it happened. But he was not a professional. If he was really a professional, he would be wearing a ghillie suit. And he wouldn't, I understand, that his weapon of choice was not an AK-47. I mean, these people know nothing about guns that talk about this. Apparently, it was an SKS. I have one. I actually prefer it to an AK-47. Has the same kind of action in that, but you wouldn't use that if you're going to shoot at something something 300 or 400 or 500 yards out, like Trump would be. It's it's for that round, and that rifle is for much closer in work. Really, it's like a deer rifle. Uh, so it was the wrong weapon. He wasn't disguised properly, but he knew Trump was going to be there, and he was waiting there. How did he know this? Because he wasn't from the county. So he was an outsider. What's
Not
going
only
to
that,
do?
apparently the guy has very limited sources of income, flew there first class from Hawaii to be there, was in a car that had stolen plates on it.
Hmm.
I mean, there's all kinds, like he had a rifle that had the serial number removed from it. I mean,
How did
there's
he
a
get
lot.
that at the last minute? Because he wouldn't have flown in from Hawaii with it.
Yeah. It's very suspicious. I mean, it all looks like a setup. Also, he has all these ties to Ukraine. I mean, he was recruiting people for their foreign militia. He has lots of social media posts about that. I mean, it's I mean, it's like an Oswald type character, honestly.
Yeah, but of course, I don't think Oswald did it. I really don't, for a number of reasons that we've discussed in the past.
Yeah.
But they're going to try again. And what was this explosive thing that just happened this morning? I haven't read the documents.
Apparently, it was they found oh, some I saw different just headlines about it, but because there wasn't much detailed reporting yet. But apparently, they're on the route to his uh, rally he was having. The police discovered a explosive device next to the road.
Hmm. An IED. This is perhaps a little bit of blowback from Iraq and Afghanistan. That's kind of
Well,
suspicious.
and remember, there were really sophisticated explosives in the van that Crooks had, apparently, that the alleged shooter, the first time around, they found like really advanced explosives that were in it.
Well, I think that they're going to try again and again and again. I mean, whether it's a particular group or whether all the jerks are coming out from under rocks at this point, I don't know. But uh, certainly, if Kamala, Kamala, or if she's installed, it really is kind of game over. Because what has she said? That she's going to do all kinds of insane things the first day. And
Yeah,
she's not
including.
a rocket. She's got very, very bad philosophical fibers running through her. Uh, bad instincts, person of low moral character, person of low intelligence. So, how the hell did she get there? How did the vegetable get there? This is,
Well, I think it's the forces behind them are what really are running this. I mean, they're empty suits.
and we don't know who it is because my favorite Zoom call that I was on yesterday with about 35 mostly fund managers, manage a lot of money, some of them well known, and a bunch of military guys, some of whom are well known, that comment on military things and have credentials to do so. Uh, they're all quite concerned about the way this is coming down. I mean, just as I was saying earlier, it's not just, yeah, I'm worried. They're really concerned. And we had a
Mm.
discussion about this. We're kind of like approaching a crisis, and the election itself may be the catalyst that sets off the crisis, if not something before.
If nothing else, the election does seem to be like a forcing function that creates all the variables that have been out there for a while that are all going in the wrong direction. It focuses them all on a specific point in time where, it has to come to a boiling point. I mean, it seems like.
Yeah, we've been writing uh, verbal science fiction here for the last few years, but it's turning out to have been unfortunately predictive
Well, and
because
that I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Because you sent me just a half an hour ago, so I haven't had a chance to really think about this, but all the things that are going on, what did you see that you picked up?
Well, I know I'm missing a lot of stuff. I was just so I found there's just a few categories of things that I picked up on, and I think in the science fiction aspect of this, I think you have to talk about what's happened with Israel in the last week. There have been several interesting events there, shocking events, really. And the first one is that apparently the Houthis, the honey badgers out there who don't give up no matter what, that they launched a hypersonic missile that struck Israel. Now, apparently it broke into fragments as it was coming into re-entry, but they used it and there was no way for Israel to defend against it. So you have that, first of all, from those people of all people.
How did they
That's
get a hold
first.
of it? I mean, I thought that the uh, US and other NATO nations were kind of patrolling the coast off of there. So how did it come in overland? Because uh, Saudi Arabia is the only land ex. How did they do this, really?
Yeah, I don't know, but one thing it did happen after um, Putin made a speech about a month ago that said if you feel like it's okay for you to support with weapons enemies of ours, Ukraine in this case, then we will adopt that same policy. We will supply weapons to enemies of yours. And I got to imagine it came from them.
And they actually have no choice. They've been backed into a corner because if you can just strike into Russia, they cannot act like a punching bag, just absorbing this. They have to strike back. They're really forced. I mean, it's like any other bully. You have to counterattack.
Right.
So
And
that
doing it by supplying weapons to some other party that can cause you trouble somewhere else is a way to kind of like keep it from escalating to all out nuclear war.
Yeah, but it is escalating now. What was this arms depot that blew up in Russia?
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, well, let me say one more thing about Israel first, though, is that their really sophisticated attack apparently on Lebanon, on Hezbollah, apparently, and others within Lebanon with these it was pagers. And apparently there were 4,000 injuries from it yesterday and a number of deaths, something like 13 or 14, I think, is the last I heard. That happened yesterday. It was shocking. I mean, that whole thing was crazy. And then the story is, well, there's some explosives. They got in the supply chain and planted some explosives in these devices. But then today, there's reports of this happening again, this time with radios and other devices. I mean, the non news service reported that even solar, like home solar installations, exploded. So I don't know if there's some signal they can, somehow just, electronic warfare that can cause some of these lithium battery devices to explode beyond the planting explosives in it. But it's a wild thing, and it makes you like, I know that this thing is my enemy. I already know that. Like, I
Of
know it's
course.
tracking me, monitoring, but I didn't know it could be an explosive device that I have in my pocket.
Yeah, and of course, it's also escalating that war that's ongoing between the Israelis and other people.
Yeah,
They can't take this lying down. They really can't.
no,
And I'm sure the Israelis know it, and they must be preparing the next things. So I think that can get out of control, and the thing with Russia can get out of control too.
yeah. So let's talk about that ammo depot that was blown up. So this was just after the week after there was all this talk about the UK coming out saying that they supported direct strikes using their Storm Shadow missiles, and and Canada saying the same thing, Trudeau, and then the US was sounding like they were going to approve it also, but then apparently they said no, like they weren't going to. But then all of a sudden you have this explosion, which pretty serious looking explosion of this arms depot in Russia, and they say even Russia's saying it was a drone that did it. But if Russia says it was a direct strike, then they have to retaliate. So like their people will demand it. So they're in a position where they have to downplay it while they're figuring out what they're going to do. But it certainly looks like a direct strike. It doesn't look like something a little drone could do.
No, it looked like a big explosion. And of course, I don't believe much that I see on the news, but all this stuff is coming together at once. And I don't know where it's going to end, but could it possibly end with our brave Solon saying, "Wait a minute, we ought to sit down and have a powwow so that." But who's going to have the powwow on the American side? The vegetable or stupid Kamala? I mean, no, or Blinken, a proven incompetent. I mean, there's nobody that can talk on our side, or for that matter, on NATO's side. I mean, who are they going to use? The current equivalent of Ilse She-Wolf of the SS that's running the EU. What's her name? Ursula something.
Von der Leyen.
Yes. Uh, no, it's not good. And of course, Netanyahu absolutely doesn't want to talk with any of these people. He really would like to wipe them out. And the feeling is entirely mutual. So where does it end? They're not going to sit down and come up with some nonviolent solution. I think they're going to escalate.
I think they're going to escalate. I think so too. The question is, what kind of escalation would need to happen in order to serve the purposes domestically, where they can have a real national crisis that demands a whole of government approach and can justify all of the nonsense they want to do to bring the country together? That's what I worry about.
Well, perhaps it'll be perhaps something along the lines of what Michael Young has been saying. He's of the opinion, having run all around the world increasingly in recent times, he believes that this is an actual full-scale war, an invasion that's going on, that many, not all, but many of these migrants that have entered the US can be activated like sleeper cells. But we're not talking about just one or two people that do a few things that are inconvenient. We're talking about thousands of young men that are here in the US for a reason. Possibility? Yeah, a real possibility. And that would be an excuse to lock the country down for sure.
Right. Widespread, distributed terror attacks, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's so many ways. I mean, the US, since we are have always been in the past domestically a peaceful country, you can take out electrical substations so easily, lots of them, and bring down the grid that way. You can screw up the air transport system just by at a distance shooting at a few planes and taking out the just with the simple gun, for God's sake. That'll crash a couple planes, close the whole thing down. I mean, this is if John and I ever get around to writing the #4 novel, Terrorist, this is not going to be something Charles Knight's doing, although he's going to be accused of it. But there are so many ways of terrorizing people that they'll make the government lock it down. And I think that's on the runway.
Yeah, you see just even these, but do you remember the DC sniper, that guy
Yes,
and all the havoc this one guy caused?
one guy with an old car where it was in the trunk with a hole and was shooting people basically at filling stations, I think were his main targets. And how did they catch him? Because he would have been extremely hard to catch, being able to just move with an ordinary car from one place to another.
Yep, that went on for weeks, and it disrupted everything in the area.
Yeah, it
Scared the hell
did.
out of people.
Yeah, so they could take that show on the road and do one of dozens and dozens of things. I mean, look, anybody can sit down with a bottle of Jack Daniels at night and figure out all kinds of ways to be a bad boy. And it's quite possible that a lot of these migrants are here for nefarious purposes. And I'm not talking about necessarily the Haitians that have been dropped on towns.
Right.
That's a
Right.
different
There,
story.
it's a different problem. Totally different problem. Yeah. So yeah,
And this is something I just listen, let me tell you something that's kind of interesting, I think. Here, kind of in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, where I am, this is a place which is it's it's there's rivers in the Chesapeake Bay and boats, and it's kind of a retirement community, okay? That's what it is. There's mostly old people around here because it's very pleasant. And young people in this area where I am get the hell out of Dodge and go to a city because they're not going anywhere around here. They can work in fast food or that's it. So there aren't many young people here to start with. I don't see any at all, but they get out of town as soon as they can get a driver's license. Okay. So what's happening is I see, my God, it's a huge excavation project to build a new high school. I'm saying, what the hell is going on here? They don't need a new high school in this area. It's crazy. It's expensive. It's unnecessary. And so on my Zoom call that I mentioned earlier, one of the guys who's really been investigating this, he's not a flake. He's a rich guy that manages a lot of money. He says, nope. I think that your town is next on the runway to put migrants because instead of using it for a high school, which is what they're saying, it'll be a place where they can shelter all these people that'll be dropped into your area. Possible? Yeah, it makes sense to me. At this point, I wouldn't have thought of that. It's so crazy.
oh Jesus. Yeah, it's a disaster. But that's a different problem than the terrorism problem. And that is the way that is the way you shut things down in advance of
Mhm.
an election. That is the way you get people so afraid, so willing to comply with whatever, so excited for order and peace again that they're willing to tolerate a lot less freedom.
Got to do something, and the government's got to straighten it out. So we're way past the demoralization stage. of America, we're well into destabilization. And I guess things will be normalized uh, as a police state in the next few years.
Okay, so some of the other things I saw was censorship ramping up. There's a clip of Hillary Clinton circulating where she proposes jailing Americans for
God,
posting misinformation. She's like, there must be some deterrence for this 'cause it's really damaging.
she really is a criminal personality. I'm not just talking about the approximately 100 people, a statistically impossible amount that have met strange or violent deaths around her. But I mean, this woman is genuinely dangerous.
The State Department also calling for more censorship. And it just seems like in advance of a war, like in advance of things escalating, you got to control the narrative. You got to control the narrative.
Yeah,
So it's like they're laying the groundwork for that. Um,
yeah, and people that have a feather out of place, like a chicken in a coop. If one chicken has a feather, a few feathers out of place, the others peck it to death. Well, it's the same thing. They don't want to have. My suspicion is that forget about people that are overt enemies of the state. I'm, I'm glad I'm on a plane to the Orient tomorrow morning, frankly. Uh, it's time to get out of Dodge. No, they're like what did you say, Gavin Newsom has.
Gavin Newsom signed a bill that said that parody is illegal in California now.
Of course, the
Uh,
Supreme Court will shut it down until when Kamala is elected. The Supreme Court will be packed, and that'll be okay then.
Well, and you know though that there's a guy who there is somebody who from the 2016 election campaign circulated a meme that told people Democrats the wrong way to vote or the wrong time to vote or something like that. And that guy is in federal prison now.
Mm.
So it was a meme, just that he reposted online and he is in federal prison. So it's not like it's not like the Supreme Court or the Constitution is protecting people right now.
Well, and it's actually worse in England, as bad as it's getting here, because it's very hard to get reports on this. But one report that I got is that there are 400 Brits that have been imprisoned, and not just overnight. We're talking serious offenses for having spoken out at rallies, not saying anything. It's like, I'm for Britain, and they're arrested or posting things on Facebook. 400. That's a lot, and maybe it's more because I haven't heard anything since then.
You got to imagine it's more. Yeah, at this point, because that was a couple weeks ago, I think, for that 400 number. So in Australia seems to be like following Britain pretty closely. They have a new law, at least maybe it's just in Queensland. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure if it's the entire country. But basically, that any post on social media is considered a public act, and then any public act as already is in the law that is offensive to a an oppressed minority or these protected classes is a criminal offense that can get you imprisoned. So any Facebook post, any social media post that might be that someone might be offended by can get you in prison.
Yeah, it's getting out of control on all levels, and we don't know exactly who the actual warm bodies that are fomenting this are. I mean, we can speculate. George Soros and his pals, Klaus Schwab and his pals, but well, Hillary Clinton and her pals. But I don't know exactly what the organization between these people is. I guess they just all share the same Weltanschauung, have the same interests, the
But
deep.
it seems I think that's all true. I think that's all true, but it also does seem like there's coordination at all levels. Because it reminds me of during the COVID stuff, the coordination of policies across all the states were the same. They had the same deal with Pfizer, all of them, where they couldn't share the public information. They had, it was no liability. I mean, that was all rolled out very quickly, and every country most countries followed the exact same template, more or less what they could get away with, but it's like they were all operating from a playbook.
Yeah. Years ago, uh, there was this meme that went around because of was he the president of General Motors? I think so, where he said, "What's good for General Motors is good for America." Well, in principle, I would have said, yeah, that's right, because General Motors produces cars and it employs people, so you want them to be healthy and happy. But actually, what's good for General Motors, and we can say any large corporation, whether it's big pharma or big tech or big media, whatever it is not good for America because they're so hooked up with the state. They're their own special class at this point. Maybe we're going to go into a period of new feudalism. Uh, Pretty much, oddly enough, like in that great movie, it's about 40 years old with Jimmy Caan, Rollerball. And it was the only part in that movie that I didn't particularly like back then is that they presented the big corporations as running the world. And I said, no, no, the corporations produce things. They create bread and oil and all that. They're our friends. But the fact is, they're so hooked up with the government and so powerful at this point and are attracting the same damn kind of people that are interested in power over other people that, Jesus, this is crazy for capitalist to say, but they're not our friend anymore.
They're definitely not.
I love small business, but once you get into a business that's large enough that you got to put thousands of people into cubicles, it's a very different thing. But it's a trend. It's the way the world is going. So
So you think a neo-feudalism
I
might be on
think
the way?
that's actually the way things are evolving. And I say neo-feudalism because in feudal times, you didn't have a middle class. Yeah, you were starting to have a middle class when people were moving into burgs and villages and little cities. And that's where the bourgeois, which has become a bad word. If you're bourgeois, you have all these contemptible values. But actually, being a bourgeois is a good thing. It means you're from the French word, which means city. You're a city person that has to create, and you're not a peasant living out rubbing in the dirt, and you're not one of the elite that's running around, slaying people with your sword to keep them in order. So I think we're going back to something like a neo-feudalism, middle class being compressed, as Lenin said, ground between the millstones of taxation and inflation, and the peasant class are getting bigger, and the elite are keeping control of them. Yeah, neo-feudalism. I think that's
Wow.
where we're going.
Oh, that's not good. So the other last thing on the censorship stuff is that there's a new censorship bill that's in the Australian Parliament, and basically it puts on the social media companies the onus of enforcement, where they can lose up to 10% of their global revenues in fines if they violate this. And it talks about all these harms, and the harms can be, of course, medical disinformation, um, anything that harms the operation or integrity of a commonwealth, state, territory, local government, or election process. They have, of course, vilification of any group, especially distinguished by race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, etc.
Of
But they
course.
also have this one part in there. It says it's harmful if it causes imminent harm to the Australian economy, including harm to public confidence in the banking system or financial markets.
And that actually makes sense because the whole world engages in fractional reserve banking, which means that when somebody puts $1 into a bank, they can lend out, in effect, 8 or $10 by relending, and then that loan is redeposited, and that's relent and redeposited and relent. So it's a daisy chain. And if you get if everybody runs down to the bank and wants their money back, it's not going to be there. I don't know if we've ever talked about this in any detail, but it used to be there was an ironclad distinction between demand deposits, which the bank would keep safe for you and allow you to change checks against without going down and getting your money and taking it out and paying the person. And you'd pay the bank for that privilege and to store your money. Those were demand deposits. And you had time deposits, which were lent out for a specific period of time. You couldn't get your money back until that time elapsed because it was lent out to somebody else. Uh, that's all gone. I mean, it's all fractional reserve, and that's why banking has been so profitable. But the whole system rests on a foundation of quicksand, not just sand, quicksand.
So everyone has essentially their deposits are time deposits, meaning they don't really have access to it now.
No,
I mean, they theoretically they do, but they all think they do. So if even 10% of depositors showed up trying to get their money, the bank probably wouldn't survive it.
entirely apart from the fact that their money is just paper. It's not actual gold anymore. And that's why the Federal Reserve can bail banks out because they don't want the whole financial system to just create more money and bail the bank out.
But
No,
this new law, it would make a David Rogers Webb book illegal, right? I mean, you wouldn't, because that undermines confidence in the banking system and the financial system.
yes, it does. And I believe, and this is worth researching, but when I first got into the this business of talking about finances and the state of the world and so forth, years ago, I was informed that there's a law against undermining confidence in the American financial system. And it did exist then. It has not been used since then. But I think we already have such a law on the books. And I'll see if I can find the reference. We have so many laws. We've got hundreds of thousands of laws, but I understand that's already there. It just hasn't been observed or used by the powers that be. But I'll have to look into that again.
Yeah, it reminds me of the book. What is it? Two felonies a day. That
Three felonies a
three
day.
felonies a day. Sorry,
And
it's probably five by now.
That was written 20 years ago. It's probably more like
Probably.
five now.
Right. And so that's what people don't understand is that they without causing any harm to anybody, by going about your normal life, you are likely violating some laws, and under serious scrutiny, you could be punished in ways you can't possibly imagine. And if there is a crackdown that comes of any kind, it won't be hard for them to find an excuse.
It's just like Beria told Comrade Stalin, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. It's Kafkaesque. I mean, this is not the America that was founded and the America we learned to know and love. So I'm happy that you're ensconced in Uruguay. I'll join you there after a month's hiatus in the exotic Orient, starting in Malaysia and going to Thailand. And then I'll spend a week in Sri Lanka. I prefer to call it Ceylon. This is, once again, a question of how the English language has been captured by other people. Anyway, I won't go into that now. And I'll be back in Buenos Aires for a while and back to Uruguay. And that'll be after the election. And I hope that we're dead wrong and that Kamala is not installed. But I'm not optimistic.
Well, for our we have on the schedule for our file members, we're doing a meetup in Buenos Aires on November 5th on election day. So maybe it'll turn into a little election watch party.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to join that party. And yeah, that'll be fun to get together with everybody. And let us not forget that November 5th is Guy Fawkes Day. And I would urge everybody, if you haven't seen it, to watch V for Vendetta, because it's not a happy ending, but I think that's the best possible scenario, what happened in V for Vendetta, and it's a hell of a good movie.
That's a great movie. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, you have to watch it. I got to rewatch it. I haven't seen it in years, so I got to get back and check it out again. So I love that movie.
And I love it because at the end, the one of the themes from that is probably well, I love the Rolling Stones song so much, but Street Fighting Man is playing at the end.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, watch that. You'll see that that song plays almost in its entirety as the end of the movie.
I just think of the 1812 overture when I think of the music from the movie.
Oh, that's there too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, uh, the score, music, is very important for movies. It's why movies have, to some degree, replaced the written word because it gives you much more input, visual and oral, in addition to just reading things, which I still like to do. But I've got this great library in back of me, and I was just looking through a few volumes before we got on the air. And trouble with reading is that it goes slowly. How many books can you absorb and then remember what you absorb?
Well, you remember a lot more of them than I do. So at least you have a great memory.
Yeah, it's pointless. Like I've got like four translations of Dante's Inferno, which is really a good read. And they're all different the way people interpret what Dante said in the original Italian. And I prefer the Ciardi translation. I really do.
Yeah,
But
I ordered a copy of that for Bella and I's homeschool because after you said it, and we're right now we're reading The Prince. I haven't read that in a long time, so I thought it'd be good to go back to that and understand the motivation of our public officials.
I read it in high school, and not being politically involved in high school, obviously, it didn't really mean too much. But I ought to read it again. And yeah,
It's
get a
been interesting so far.
yeah, exactly. Uh, God, it's going to be so interesting to see what happens in the next 60 days.
It will, but I'm glad you're getting out of there too. I got to get Maxim out of there in the next week or so, and I'll rest a lot easier with watching it from afar.
I just got an email from an old friend in Canada who was asking me, I've got to get out of here, but I really don't know where to go. And I fear that it's getting late in the day to leave this place.
It is getting late in the day. I mean, uh, you gotta, yeah. If he has no idea where to go at this stage, it'll be tough. So you gotta get started. You gotta get because you have to have boots on the ground in the place. You can't. It's not a theoretical decision.
No, you can't just land there and live in a hotel. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
No, doesn't at all. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug. Now you're going to be traveling a little bit, so we won't be back this week, but we'll do another one of these this time next week. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I'll be airborne, and maybe let me see. Today is Wednesday. Maybe we can do something. I don't know if it'll be my Sunday or Saturday.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah,
There'll be something for people next week, if nothing else. So, all
yeah.
right. Well, thank you very much, Doug. Safe travels to you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Talk to you soon, Matt.